Hey, everybody, welcome. Happy Monday. This is another coaching tidbit brought to you by Teaching to a Riot. Today, we're going to be talking about sensory seeking and sensory avoidant students, how to tell if your students are sensory seeking or if they're sensory avoidant. And what does that look like for behavior in the classroom? Because that's really the key. Because as like I will be saying in this live, a lot of sensory processing issues or sensory seeking or sensory avoidant behaviors gets labeled bad behavior, and then we are dealing with it in ways that are not very productive. So, we are going to be talking today about how to tell if your students are sensory seeking or how to tell if they are sensory avoidant by observing their behavior, maybe having some conversations, and even you'll notice if you're sensory seeking and sensory avoidant by some of the examples I bring up. So, if you are a teacher, a parent, or anyone who works with kids, you may notice that some of your students are constantly moving, touching everything, making noises, blurting, getting in your space, or maybe even they're just getting right out of their chair and walking around or running or spinning. It's all very colorful student behavior. And so while others seem to avoid, they'll avoid sensory experiences like loud noises, bright lights, certain textures, or light touches. Like I'm sensory avoidant like crazy when it comes to like a hair of mine will fall out of my head and like get on my skin, and it will drive me absolutely crazy. I can't concentrate on anything else. So I hate that light, like that light sensation, that light touch of having a hair like on the back of my arm. Oh my gosh, it drives me nuts. So today we're breaking down how to tell if your students are sensory seeking or sensory avoidant, and more importantly, what you can do about it in the classroom. So if you're tuning in live, drop a hey in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, let me know where you're watching from. Or if you're watching live, let me know where you're watching from. I'm super interested. And drop that in the comments. And if you're watching the replay, type replay in the chat so I know that you stopped by. And still let me know where you're from, because I really like the fact that this audience is so like from everywhere. We got people, I just spoke to a teacher in Amsterdam, like people from everywhere. Okay, so what does it mean when I say sensory seeking and sensory avoidant? I'm going to start with a quote by Patty Odier, which she's an OT. And she says that behavior is a reflection of the organization of your nervous system at that moment and under those conditions. So, a lot of the times we are viewing children's behavior, students' behavior, or even fellow adults' behavior as choices, like though they're choosing to act like this, or we attribute it to a fixed trait, like, oh, that's just how they are. But Patty says that behavior is actually the reflection of your nervous system. And she is super, super right. And we are going to talk about that now. So, sensory processing disorder is a common but often misunderstood condition where sensory messages are getting scrambled in the brain. Imagine a traffic jam on the sensory highway when the brain can't make sense of sensory input. People can't respond appropriately to their world. And this is why some brains some kids, some adults seem to overreact to certain things, while others seem oblivious to things happening around them. Like when you're calling your child to come do something and you have to say it 1,500 times because they can't discriminate your voice from the environment. So, at the core of sensory processing disorder is what's called sensory modulation disorder. I'm not going to get too into the weeds with this, but sensory modulation disorder means that a brain struggles to regulate sensory input. They can't turn the volume down or turn the volume up on sensory input they're taking in. So let's say you're in a car, right? And someone starts honking their horn behind you. Your brain may react normally and it will notice the honk, think, well, that's annoying and overreactive, and then begin to ignore it. You don't really have much reaction to it. It's just somebody honking because they're irritated. But a sensory processing disorder brain, they will have several different reactions. Okay. They might think, um, like, oh my gosh, okay, so they might take in that horn sound and their brain can't turn the volume down on that horn sound. So they become agitated and frazzled. And that the fact that somebody honked the horn behind them throws their entire day off. The brain can't turn the volume down on that sensory experience. And something as simple as someone honking a horn can agitate them a few hours to the entire day. And that that's what's called hyperresponsive. I'm going to go into that later. Then there might be another reaction. You don't even notice the horn honking. Like it might be by the third honk that you're like, "Whoa, what's going on?" Okay? That is what's called hyporesponsive. So you can't turn the volume your brain can't turn the volume up on sensory information. So it takes a lot of sensory information for you to even notice. And then the third type is sensory cravers. And those are going to be the people that have their music up so loud that they don't even notice the honking at all. Okay. So you've got hyper responsive. You can't turn the volume down on sensory information. You have hypo responsive, that O, hypo, and that's you can't turn the volume up. You're barely noticing sensations. And then there's the sensory cravers, and they're blaring the music. They want as much sensory input as possible. They might be banging their heads. They might be singing along to the music. They might be jamming, right? Research suggests that up to 70% of children with learning disabilities also have sensory processing challenges. Sensory processing is not rare. More and more research is coming out about sensory processing disorder, and we are going to see it being introduced into the schools once it hits mainstream. 100%. I mean, it already is. Like we have the OTs, right? But they're really not listened to or respected as much as they should be. Um, they're kind of thought as like, uh, take my kid for a sensory break. Sensory processing influences the brain, learning, behavior, everything. Okay, so not only are 70% of children with learning disabilities also have sensory processing challenges, there is more and more research coming out about the link between sensory processing disorder and anxiety. Boom. Okay, which we're seeing a lot of in classrooms today. So this is an up and coming field, But institutions are devoting more resources into researching sensory processing issues. So if you are a teacher or an admin, I definitely suggest keeping an eye out for more information. You can check out, we have a workshop on March 19th at 8 p.m. on sensory processing and regulation in the classroom. It's going to be happening on Zoom. If you really want to dive into how sensory processing influences our students, you can come at workshop or go to my website in my bio and go to the workshop series tab on my website. Okay, so how sensory seeking and sensory avoidance disrupts learning. We just identified the three different types of sensory processing. Hyper responsive, your brain can't turn the volume down. Hypo-responsive, your brain can't turn the volume up enough for you to notice stuff in your environment, or sensory craving, and you are seeking out sensory stimulation every chance you get. Think metalheads who love loud metal music and have a lot of tattoos and piercings. Sensory craving. So, how do these different types affect our students in the classroom? Well, kids who are hypo-responsive, they can't turn the volume up enough or are sensory craving, might struggle to sit still, always wiggling, fidgeting, tapping, humming, constantly touching things, invading personal space, spinning, running, hitting. They make noise all the time, humming, clicking pens, talking loudly. They love rough play, crashing into things, and high energy activities. They seek out intense flavors, strong smells, or heavy textures. These are the kids. Okay. So when I was in the classroom, I had this big recycle bin for for kids to build with, right? There were milk jugs, old coffee containers, old creamer containers. Like it was just filled with plastic recyclables. My sensory seeking students would be the first people to go up to that recycling bin, open up an old stanky creamer container and stick it right up to their nose. And then be like, "Oh, that's disgusting." I'm like, "Well, why did you smell it?" That is sensory seeking. Those are your hypo-responsive kids, okay? Meanwhile, kids who are hyper-responsive, they can't turn down the volume, become sensory avoidant, and they might get overwhelmed in noisy, bright, or chaotic environments. They hate fluorescent lighting. Can somebody please tell the people who are building schools that fluorescent lighting is terrible for the brain and hypersensory, hyper responsive kids, sensory avoidant kiddos, lit to the fluorescent lighting. Anyway, so they will get overwhelmed in noisy, bright, or chaotic environments. They avoid certain textures, foods, or even clothing materials. They startle easily at sudden sounds or unexpected touch. They cover their ears, shield their eyes. They get anxious with unpredictable changes in routine. Those are your typical hyper responsive sensory avoidant students or brains. So, what does this mean for learning? When a student is overwhelmed by their environment or understimulated by their environment, their brain is going to struggle to stay engaged. They will have a hard time focusing, paying attention, prioritizing what they should do next, organizing information, remembering anything. They are simply trying to survive the school day. So these sensory types impact behavior, attention, emotional regulation, and ultimately how well a brain can succeed in the classroom. So, why knowing your student sensory profiles are crucial? Understanding whether a child is sensory seeking or sensory avoidant isn't just a nice to know fact. It is essential for creating a classroom where a brain can actually succeed. Why? Because sensory challenges often get mislabeled as bad behavior. Somebody throw like the clap sign up for me in the chat. Like, I'm going to say it again. Sensory challenges often get mislabeled as bad behavior. A student who is constantly moving or making noise might not be trying to disrupt class. They may just need more sensory input to stay regulated because they can't turn the volume up on their sensory input because they're hypo responsive, or they are getting super overwhelmed by all the sensory input because they can't turn the volume down on their sensory responses. So kids who have sensory issues, they tend to shut down or melt down. They're not being defiant. They're just trying to survive because their brain is either overstimulated to the point where it's in fight or flight, or their brain is not getting the information it needs to tell its body it's safe. A really, really, really good quote about how important sensory input is to our daily life is by Neil Gaiman in his book, American Gods, which is a really good book. But he says, all we have to believe is our senses, the tools we use to perceive the world. If they lie to us, then nothing can be trusted. The way we interpret sensory information, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we feel, what we taste, what we smell, it tells us where we are, that we're safe, what's around us. It tells us our reality. And if the brain can't trust what's that input that's coming in, it doesn't know what's real and what's not. And that's why sensory processing is such a huge, huge, huge issue for students when they're in the classroom, being asked to do a lot of things at once. A child's behavior is a direct reflection of what their nervous system is experiencing at that moment. If we don't recognize their sensory types, we're missing a huge part of the picture when we talk about behavior in the classroom. So when we meet kids' sensory needs, we don't just make them more comfortable, we actually help their brains learn better. Why? Because when a child's nervous system feels safe and regulated, they trust the tools they are using to perceive their world. They can focus, listen, and engage. But if their brain is stuck in sensory overwhelm or under stimulation, their learning brain goes offline and their fight or flight turns on. Research by an OT, Moya Keneally, supports a strong relationship between sensory processing disorder and anxiety. Brains who are constantly battling their environment are more likely to experience dysregulation, leading to meltdowns, hyperactivity, or zoning out. But when we provide the right supports, we can help brains feel calm, alert, and ready to learn. I know that was a lot of information. If this was helpful, tap that heart button, show me love, and let me know in the comments what stood out to you the most. And if you have any questions about your students, I don't have time to answer them right now, but please message me and I'll answer them on my lives. And if you want activities to support sensory needs, right now in my stories, there is a link to a free sensory checklist, or it's a sensory diet, creating a sensory diet checklist. It's TTR's freebie for this March. So you can check out that in my stories, or you can go to my website in my bio and click on the freebies tab. And you can see all of the freebies TTR has. And if you want to dive in real heavy, including strategies to help regulate sensory systems and increase engagement, join us for the March 19th workshop at 8 p.m. EST on Zoom, where I'll go deep into how to use sensory strategies to improve regulation and behavior in the classroom. If you're watching this as a reel, check the caption for details. If you're watching live, comment workshop and I'll send you the info. Or you can head to my website and click on the workshop series tab, and you'll see all the information to get your ticket for March 19th. Thank you so much for hopping on. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Keep supporting your students the way they need, and I will see you at the next live. Bye, everybody. Okay, so I'm going through questions right now. Okay, so the magics of Mike, a principal should not listen, or a principal should never believe that a student needs to sit down and be quiet. It's not developmentally appropriate for a child's brain to be sitting down and being quiet. Um, Ooh, sensory seeking as a teacher, you should definitely head to my the workshop series, because the workshop series is going to give you um it's going to give you oh my gosh, I sorry, like my ADHD is so bad right now. It's going to give you strategies to create your own sensory diet. So if you are looking for ways to help your own sensory processing, March 19th's workshop is for you, fellow ADHDer. God bless us. Um, it is on Zoom, so it might be a time or there might be too much of a time delay. Oh, thank you. Okay. No questions for today, so I will see everybody.